To let webpack do its job, we can start in a package.json file. There in the scripts section, you can add a new script and you can use start as the name. These are scripts which you can trigger from the command line thereafter to bring up your development server or build for production, essentially what you saw throughout the course in our Create React App project as well. Now here the command for the start script should be webpack-dev-server, so the exact same name as we have it down there, and it's important that you get that name right. This in the end tells npm to use this package and execute it. And this is basically an executable package which will spin up a development server and also start building our files. However, just like this, it would not do much. If I run npm start now, which triggers this script, we spin up a server, but we get an error. We get an error that I need to install webpack CLI. So let's do that. Let's also install with save dev the webpack CLI, which is another tool from the webpack world, which is needed in the end to build our project. So let's install that and thereafter run npm start again and see what that gives us. And as you see, yeah, it kind of works, but also it gives us an error. The problem is that webpack really doesn't know what to do with our index.js file, with all our input files. It doesn't understand the syntax in there. This JSX syntax, it's totally unknown to webpack. So to help webpack, we need to create a webpack configuration file. A new file next to package.json, which should be named webpack.config.js. This is a default file name for which webpack will look. So this JavaScript file in the end has to provide a configuration for webpack which it is able to understand and then use. To do that here, we have to use module exports and point at a JavaScript object. This is Node.js syntax because Webpack runs on Node.js, and in the end it just exports this object from this file, and this has to be our configuration object. Now you can learn all about Webpack on the official page, webpackjs.org. There you can really learn all about the configuration, all about the settings you can have in your Webpack config file, and this is really the place you want to go to if you want a real deep dive and want to become a Webpack master. Here I'll just focus on the fundamentals that we need to get this to run. And there, one of the most important things we need to provide in this configuration is an entry point that we tell Webpack at which file it should have a look at first. Because what Webpack will do is it will start its journey at one file, then look at all the imports of this file and have a look at these files as well, and then bundle all these files together in the end. So we need to give it an entry point. And we do this with an entry option here, which takes a string and which should point at /source/index.js in our file. Because in the source folder, the index.js file, that's what Webpack should start its journey at. Now we also need to tell Webpack where to put the generated output. And for that, we add an output entry, which can be an object where we can define the path where it should write its output to. Keep in mind that Webpack will bundle all JavaScript files together. So we also have to define a file name key here. And make sure you get these keys written correctly, because Webpack will look for these specific names. Here I'll name the file bundle.js, and we can also add a public path, which should be an empty string. Now let's go back to path. Path should actually point at the folder where we want to store our generated output. And for that I'll import something with this syntax, which might look strange. This is a Node.js import syntax, and since Webpack runs on Node.js, we have to use that. And with that, we import a package which is part of Node.js itself. So we don't need to install this. It will already be there with our Node.js installation. The path package helps us work with paths. And for example, it allows us to construct an absolute path. Because this path property here requires an absolute path to the place where the output file should be written to. For that, we can use path resolve to build such an absolute path, and then use a special global variable which is available inside of Node.js scripts, __dir name. This simply is the absolute path to this folder this file lives in. And then we combine this with dist to tell webpack that this bundled.js file, so our bundled code, should be written to a dist folder inside of our project folder. That's in the end what we're saying here. Now, besides that, there are two other settings I want to add. One is the dev tool. This controls how source maps are generated, which help us with debugging when we run our code in the browser, so that we can debug our original code rather than the bundled and optimized and transformed code. And here I'll use cheap-module-evil-source-map, which is a certain way of generating quite good source maps. There are different options here, and if you want to learn all about it, as mentioned, the official docs are the place to go. One other thing we should add here is the mode key, and I'll set this to development. This simply tells webpack whether it should apply certain optimizations or not, and in development it does some optimizations that make debugging easier, but it doesn't shrink our code as much as possible. That will later change once we also provide a production configuration file. With that, we have a configuration which tells webpack how to read our files and where to write the output to. But webpack will still have problems with, for example, this JSX code and also with certain other next-gen JavaScript features. So in the next lecture, we'll have a look at how we can teach webpack how to work with certain syntax features and certain files.